Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
You know those families where everything looks fine from the outside, like a picture-perfect Christmas card with matching sweaters and fake smiles, but underneath it all there's rot that no one talks about? That was us. That was my family. And for as long as I can remember, I was the one expected to keep it all together, to stay quiet, to not make waves, especially when it came to Jake. My brother. Her favorite. Jake could do no wrong. I swear, he could crash a car into the living room and Mom would blame the architect for putting a wall there. It was like he came out of the womb with a golden halo, and I was the leftover parts God forgot to polish. He was always the funny one, the charming one, the one who got second chances like they were coupons. I got lectures, cold shoulders, and the eternal question, why can't you be more like your brother? I still remember the first time I realized it. I was 10, he was 12. We were at some cookout in Uncle Gary's backyard, and Jake had stolen a $10 bill from Aunt Linda's purse. When she found out, he cried big, fat crocodile tears, and Mom held him and told everyone he was just confused. When I once forgot to say thank you after a gift, I was grounded for a week and had to write a letter of apology. In cursive. High school was worse. Jake got caught cheating on a biology exam. They called home. Mom blamed the teacher for not making the material engaging enough. When I got a B+ instead of an A- in geometry, she asked me if I was getting distracted by boys. There were 2 sets of rules in that house, and mine came with a list of expectations longer than a CVS receipt. Fast forward 20 years. I'm 35, newly divorced, scraping the last pieces of my pride together after my husband decided he'd rather shack up with his CrossFit instructor than try therapy. I moved back in with my parents for what I thought would be a few months, just until I saved up enough to get back on my feet. My mom welcomed me like a stray cat, warm on the surface, but with a tone that said, "Don't get too comfortable." And Jake? Jake was still there. Still coasting. Still golden. He had bounced from job to job, girlfriend to girlfriend, and somehow he was still the sun around which everyone else in the family was expected to orbit. I got a temp job, started saving. Every paycheck, I'd stash a chunk into my savings account like a squirrel preparing for winter. Rent. Deposit. Maybe even a down payment for a used car that didn't smell like onion rings. That money was my escape plan. My second chance. And then, one Tuesday evening, I logged into my bank account after work, and my stomach hit the floor. $5,000 gone. Not missing. Gone. Clean out. Not over time, not chipped away slowly. Just gone. I stared at the number like it would change if I refreshed the page. I checked the transaction history. There it was. A withdrawal, made the day before. In person. At a branch 20 minutes away. I hadn't been near that bank in weeks. I ran through the possibilities. Identity theft? Fraud? Some clerical mistake? But then I remembered Jake. He had been in the kitchen yesterday, acting twitchy. He'd borrowed my keys once last week, said he needed something from my trunk. My bank card was in the glove box. My PIN? Written on a sticky note in my wallet, which I stupidly left on the front seat. Yeah, I know. Dumb. But still, who does that to their own sister? I confronted him that night. He was sprawled on the couch, watching reruns of some garbage reality show where people scream at each other in hot tubs. I walked in, holding my phone with the transaction open on the screen. "Jake," I said, as calm as I could. "Did you take $5,000 from my account?" He looked at me. Blinked. Took a swig of beer. "What? No. What are you talking about?" I held the phone closer to his face. "From this branch. Yesterday. That's your signature." He leaned in, squinted at the screen, and shrugged. "Oh, that. Yeah. I needed it. I'll pay you back." Like he'd borrowed a cup of sugar. Like $5,000 wasn't 3 months of hard, boring work. Like it wasn't my way out. "You'll pay me back?" I asked, my voice cracking. "With what? You don't even have a job." He laughed. Actually laughed. Relax. We're family. It's not like I stole it from a stranger. Damn, you always get so uptight about stuff. That's when I felt something break inside me. Not snap. Break. Quietly. Like a plate cracking clean in half. And the worst part? My mom was standing in the hallway, listening. I turned to her, eyes wet, voice shaking. You knew about this? She gave me that look. The one that says I'm being dramatic. He told me he needed help. He was going to tell you. Don't make a scene. Family sticks together. I could have screamed. I wanted to. I wanted to tear that living room apart, knock over the table, shout every buried resentment I'd swallowed since I was 10. But I didn't. I stood there, stunned, alone, humiliated, and I left. Drove to a parking lot and cried in the front seat for an hour and a half. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, calm, dismissive, like I was the problem. Like the real crime wasn't theft, but the audacity of calling it out. So I stopped trying to sleep. I got up, walked quietly past Jake's door, down the hallway, into the laundry room. His coat was hanging on the hook. I reached into the pocket, and there it was, like a gift from the universe. A receipt. The same branch. Same date. Same withdrawal. And next to it, my name, printed in bold letters. He hadn't even bothered to fake anything. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't scream. I'd wait. I'd plan. And I'd make sure the whole damn family heard it when the silence finally shattered. The morning after I found the receipt in Jake's coat, I made myself a cup of coffee I didn't even want and sat at the kitchen table waiting for my mom to come downstairs, which she did like clockwork every morning around 7:30, in her robe, with her tight little frown and her slippers that scraped across the floor like a warning bell. I didn't even look up from the folded receipt until she started pouring her coffee, and when I did, I simply slid the piece of paper across the table and said, "You still think I'm being dramatic?" She didn't touch it at first. Just stared at the white edge peeking out from under her mug like it might burn her fingers. Then slowly, without saying a word, she picked it up, scanned it, and sighed in that long, suffering way that made me feel like the villain just for existing. He needed help, she said again, as if repeating it enough times would make it true. He was going to pay you back. I don't remember standing up, but I remember how loud my chair sounded as it scraped backward across the tile. I said, "He stole from me, Mom. He walked into a bank with my card and took $5,000. That's not needing help, that's a crime. That's theft." She didn't even flinch. "He's your brother," she said, as if that covered it. As if the fact that he and I came from the same womb meant I was supposed to accept betrayal like it was part of the deal. "And you are not dragging this family's name through the mud. Do you understand me?" It was like I'd fallen into a movie from the 1950s where women fainted over bad news and nobody ever talked about what really went on behind closed doors. I could feel the heat rise up my neck, my fists clenched tight at my sides. "Dragging the family's name?" I said, nearly choking on the absurdity of it. "He stole $5,000, and you're worried about appearances?" That was when she said it, for little words that had been her motto since before I could spell my own name. Don't make a scene. I left the kitchen. I left the conversation. I left the idea that I was going to be heard or understood or defended. I sat in my car in the driveway with the engine off for nearly 2 hours, trying to decide whether I was about to do something I couldn't take back. Then I called the police. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was the only thing left I could do that felt like I wasn't completely invisible. The officer I spoke with on the phone, Officer Riley, was kind, patient, asked a lot of questions, walked me through the steps, told me what they needed, a copy of the transaction history, proof the account was mine, the withdrawal receipt. I had it all. Jake hadn't even bothered to hide his tracks. Within 48 hours, they'd brought him in for questioning. Within 72, he was arrested. He didn't spend the night. Of course not. Mom posted bail so fast it made my head spin. She didn't even call me. I found out because I saw Jake's Jeep in the driveway when I got home from work, like nothing had ever happened. When I stepped into the house, the silence was heavier than it had ever been. Mom wouldn't even look at me. She passed me in the hallway without a word, like I was a ghost, like my name had been scratched out of the family Bible with a penknife. From that day on, it was like I'd committed the crime, not Jake. The house was cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. She stopped making extra food for dinner. Laundry that I'd tossed in the machine got pulled out and dumped in a basket before it finished. Jake, meanwhile, walked around with this smug little half-smile, like he'd won something. Like this was a game, and I'd overplayed my hand. Every time I passed him, he'd say things like, "You happy now?" or "You really went nuclear, huh?" One day, he even said, "You think you're better than us just because you got a temp job and a Pinterest vision board." And he laughed. He actually laughed. But you know what the funny thing is? He stole $5,000 from me. That's like $500,000 quarters. Or was it 1,000? Wait, no. I think $5,000 is like 25 million nickels. Whatever, I'm not here to do math. I'm here to say that what he stole was more than just money. He took trust, safety, my belief that I could go home and be protected after the wreck my marriage had left me in. And yet somehow, I was the one walking around that house like I'd kicked the family dog. One night, I couldn't sleep. I was lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, running over every conversation, every time I'd swallowed my pride to avoid making a scene. I thought about that Christmas when Jake accidentally opened my gift and said it was an honest mistake. I thought about Mom covering for him when he crashed her car and blamed the neighbor's kid. I thought about every single time she had chosen peace over truth, silence over honesty, and Jake over me. That was the night I opened my laptop and started drafting what I now call the Christmas card plan. I didn't know how it would end or how far I'd go, but I knew one thing for sure. This time, I was going to make a scene. Not loud, not angry, not with screaming or plates thrown or sobbing in the corner. No, this time, I'd do it on paper. Neatly folded, with glittery red envelopes, and just enough silence to make it ring in their ears for years. A week later, I got the email. A bland subject line. One PDF attachment. The mugshot. And seeing it, his face, bloated with anger or embarrassment or maybe just that same smug disbelief, wasn't satisfying the way I thought it might be. No, it was something else entirely. It was fuel. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace or resolution or understanding. It comes from being shut out, from doors closing softly in the middle of the night when you weren't even aware people were leaving. After the arrest, and after Jake's mugshot made its way into the system, that silence wrapped around me like a second skin. At first, it was subtle. The group chat that had once buzzed with pointless memes, forwarded recipes, and endless "look what Jake made for dinner" photos started to dry up. No one said anything directly, of course. God forbid anyone in this family ever use their words for anything more than half-truths or guilt, but the shift was unmistakable. I would send a text and get no reply for hours. Then someone would suddenly post a photo of Jake smiling with his arms around some new girl, like nothing had ever happened, and I'd realize the conversation had continued without me. Aunt Linda was the first to say something out loud. She called one evening while I was microwaving leftover mac and cheese and said, in that nasal voice of hers that always made me feel like I was being lectured by a congested owl, "Sweetheart, I just feel like this whole thing could have been handled a little more quietly. Don't you think?" She didn't wait for an answer, just steamrolled through the next part, telling me how families go through hard times, how siblings fight, how I shouldn't have involved outsiders like the police. Outsiders. Like laws only apply to strangers. Like being related means you're exempt from consequences. I didn't say much. I let her talk. I let the whole damn family talk. They didn't want to know how it felt to walk through the house like a ghost. They didn't want to hear about the way my mother started slamming cabinets when I walked into the kitchen, or how she would accidentally forget to include me in dinner plans, church outings, or even basic conversations about the week ahead. I was invisible and yet somehow still the center of their disdain, like I had brought shame down on the family name because I dared to speak the truth. Meanwhile, Jake went back to his life like nothing happened. I swear, the man could walk into a burning building, steal the fire extinguisher, and still come out looking like a hero. He started posting selfies again, him at the gym, flexing in front of mirrors, captioned with things like grind mode activated and don't let haters kill your vibe. He even posted a photo of a new watch one day with the caption earned, not given, and I nearly threw my phone into traffic. The comments were full of heart emojis and praise from women who probably didn't know he'd stolen $5,000 from his own sister. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. That's the thing with charmers like Jake. They don't have to be decent. They just have to be loud and good-looking enough to sell the story. I tried dating for a minute. I went on 2 dates with a guy named Chris who sold insurance and had a smile that made me feel like maybe there were still decent men left in the world. But by the second dinner, I was so emotionally worn down, so tired of pretending to be fine, that when he asked how my week was going, I accidentally launched into a 5-minute rant about family betrayal, gaslighting, and why the phrase, "family sticks together," was just emotional blackmail dressed up as a virtue. He never called again. Can't blame him. I wouldn't have called me back either. Even my boss started noticing. I'd catch her looking at me across the office, that subtle tilt of the head that says, should I ask, or should I pretend not to notice? I was doing my job. Barely. I'd sit at my desk, knock out the reports, respond to emails, fake smile in meetings, then drive home and sit in my car for 10 minutes before I had the energy to go inside. The house wasn't home anymore. It was just a building where my mother shot me glances like daggers and Jake walked around like a man who had been proven right by the universe. And then it hit me none of them were going to say sorry. Not my mom. Not Jake. Not Aunt Linda or anyone else in the gallery of enablers I shared DNA with. They were going to pretend it never happened, or worse, that it was my fault. They were going to sit around the Christmas tree, sipping cider and talking about how tense I'd been lately, wondering if I was finally over that little thing with Jake. That was when the idea really took shape, not just anger, not just revenge, but a reckoning. I went to the craft store that weekend, and I bought a stack of blank Christmas cards. Thick paper. Classy. Plain white with little silver snowflakes embossed on the front. I bought glittery red envelope seals, the kind that look almost festive until you realize how sharp they are when you peel them open. I went to the print shop and made 20 copies of the police report, front and back, with Jake's mugshot centered on the first page like a stamp of authenticity. He didn't even look embarrassed in the photo, just annoyed. Like the mugshot was some minor inconvenience in a day otherwise filled with gym reps and smoothies. Back home, I slipped one report into each card. No message. No signature. Just the report. Just the truth. I sealed the envelopes with care and stacked them in a drawer in my closet, where they sat for weeks like little bombs, waiting. December crept up slowly. The group chat came alive again, chirping about who was bringing what dish, what color scheme we were doing for pajamas, how everyone had so much to be grateful for this year. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. My mother finally called me, voice tight and brittle like glass on the edge of shattering. "You are coming to Christmas, right?" she asked. It wasn't a question. It was a dare. There's something about Christmas morning in a dysfunctional family that feels like watching a play where everyone forgot their lines, but insists on pretending nothing's wrong anyway. The decorations were perfect in that overdone suburban way. Every garland fluffed, every ornament placed with surgical precision, every scented candle burning something with cinnamon or pine in the name. The stockings were full, the living room lit with a soft golden haze, and the fake fireplace crackled on the TV like we were all starring in some Hallmark special that reeked of emotional dishonesty and eggnog. I had been up since 5 a.m., not because I was excited, but because my heart had been pounding in my chest like it was rehearsing for a courtroom testimony. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet, where the envelopes were lined up in a neat row inside a Target bag. I had written no names on them, didn't need to. I knew exactly how many people would be there. I knew their routines, where they would sit, how they would smile, who would fake laugh first. I even knew who'd try to open theirs before everyone else, and I was counting on that. When I finally walked into the living room, wearing the matching pajama set my mom had left on my doorknob like some passive-aggressive peace offering, Jake was already loud and buzzing like a golden retriever on a sugar high. He had 2 cups of coffee in him and was cracking jokes about the size of the presents, nudging Mom, tossing little one-liners about being on Santa's naughty list that made Aunt Linda giggle like a drunk parakeet. I took my seat at the far end of the room, the same spot I'd always been given, like they were assigning emotional seating based on rank. I watched as Jake opened his gifts, new wireless earbuds, a Bluetooth speaker, one of those weird massage guns, a cologne set with a note that said, "For the scent of success." I didn't miss the way he winked at Mom when he opened it, or how she smiled like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. No one mentioned the elephant in the room, the fact that a man with a criminal charge had a pile of gifts while the woman he stole from was sitting there holding a paper plate with a sad-looking cinnamon roll. After the last gift had been opened and everyone was still pretending this year was like any other, I stood up slowly and said the words I'd been practicing in my head for weeks. "Wait, I made something for everyone." There was a beat of silence, a pause just long enough for eyebrows to raise and heads to tilt slightly. I reached into my oversized tote bag, the one I'd brought under the pretense of helping with cleanup, and pulled out the stack of cards. White envelopes. Glittery seals. Neatly organized. I walked around the room and handed one to each person without saying another word. I didn't rush. I made eye contact with every single one of them. Aunt Linda. Cousin Brian. My dad. Even Jake, who gave me a smirk like he thought this was going to be some Pinterest-inspired family slideshow. They started opening the cards around the same time, maybe 5 seconds apart, just long enough for the silence to shift from polite anticipation to something more brittle. Aunt Linda opened hers first. I watched her face morph from confusion to shock so fast it was almost comical. Her drink slipped from her hand and hit the carpet with a wet slap. Cousin Brian opened his next. He didn't say a word, he just stared. My mother gasped like she'd been slapped, hand covering her mouth, eyes darting to Jake like maybe there was some version of reality where this wasn't happening. My dad, true to form, said absolutely nothing. He just looked at the paper, then at me, then at the fireplace loop on the screen behind me, like he was trying to disappear into it. And Jake turned beet red. Not pink. Not flushed. Red. Like someone had just pulled the curtain off his little stage act and showed the audience the wires. His mouth opened, but for once in his life, no clever line came out. Just a trembling, high-pitched, "I thought you loved me." And I did. I really did. That was the worst part. "Yeah," I said, with a voice that didn't shake. So did I. You could hear the walls adjusting to the silence in that room, like the house itself was stunned into stillness. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The mugshot, printed in bold black ink, stared up from every lap, every hand, every paper that had slid halfway to the floor. My mother stood up then, hands shaking not from age or arthritis, but from fury. Not at Jake. Never at Jake. Her eyes burned into me like I had just stood up and screamed a confession to murder in the middle of church. "Get out," she said, voice low and trembling. "Get out of this house." At first, I thought maybe she was talking to Jake. For a split second, I let myself believe I had finally broken the spell, cracked the golden boy pedestal wide open. But then she looked directly at me, and I knew exactly who she meant. I didn't slam the door when I left, didn't say anything dramatic or clever or final, didn't throw one last parting shot over my shoulder like they do in the movies. I just walked out into the snow with my boots crunching against the ice and that strange kind of buzzing silence in my ears that only comes when your body is too numb to keep up with your heart. I could hear them inside, could still feel the heat of the fireplace on my skin and the chill of my mother's voice echoing like static in my skull. Get out. Not whispered. Not screamed. Just cold. Like she'd practiced it her whole life and finally got the moment she'd been waiting for. The thing that stuck with me, though, the part one kept chewing on like a piece of gristle I couldn't quite swallow, was how no one else said a word. Not Dad. Not Aunt Linda. Not Cousin Brian. Not even Jake. You'd think, after all that, someone might say something. But they all just sat there in that curated, over-decorated living room with their perfect wrapping paper and stiff eggnog and their lies lying flat on the floor like dead birds. I drove away in silence. No music. No tears. Just the sound of the heater rattling in my car and the occasional thunk of ice chunks under the tires. I didn't go home. Not right away. I drove out to the old overlook where we used to go as teenagers, park the car, drink beer we weren't old enough to buy, and talk about how we'd leave this town one day and never look back. Funny how life has a way of boomeranging you right back to the places you swore you'd never set foot in again. The stars were out that night. Clear sky, the kind you don't appreciate until you've lived under streetlights and noise and never-ending movement. I stared up and wondered if they were still in there, back at the house, whispering about me like I was the ghost of Christmas trauma. Maybe Mom was playing victim, maybe Aunt Linda was clutching her pearls, maybe Jake was smirking through it all like none of it mattered. Maybe it didn't. Not to them. The days after that blurred together. I didn't answer calls, not that many came. Jake sent a text the next morning. Just 3 words, let's talk sometime. I left it on read. Nothing else. No apology. No explanation. No, I messed up, or I'm sorry I made you feel like you were crazy for expecting basic decency. Just a vague, slippery olive branch he probably expected me to grab like a lifeline. I didn't. Aunt Linda, ever the spiritual warrior when it suits her, posted some cryptic Bible verse on Facebook a few days later, something about forgiveness and casting stones, followed by an emoji-heavy post about how family will always be family, even when it hurts. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't like it. Let her clutch her rosary and sip her wine and pretend her passive aggressiveness counts as moral high ground. Cousin Brian surprised me, though. He sent me a private message. Nothing long. Just, "Took guts. Proud of you." That was it. No judgment, no guilt, no expectation for a reply. Just those 7 words. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know how. But I read that message a few times in the following weeks when I started doubting myself, when the silence got too loud and the ache in my chest started whispering, "Maybe you overreacted." Because that's what trauma does. It doesn't just wound you. It makes you question the pain, makes you wonder if the bleeding is just in your head. My dad reached out about 2 weeks later. Left a voicemail. Said he didn't want to pick sides. Said he hoped we could find a way to come together again. I didn't bother calling him back. There's no side to pick when one person stole and the other simply refused to cover it up. But that's the thing with people like my father. They think neutrality is noble, that keeping quiet means keeping peace. But silence is a choice too. And in that house, silence has always spoken louder than truth. It's not about sides. That's what they never understood. It's about finally choosing myself after decades of being told to sit down, be quiet, don't make it worse. It's about standing in the middle of the room and saying no more, even when your voice shakes and your knees want to buckle. I didn't ruin Christmas. I didn't burn the house down. I simply handed out the truth, wrapped in snowflakes and sealed with glitter. And now I live differently. Not better. Not perfect. But freer. I moved into a small apartment across town, a little 2-bedroom with creaky floors and ugly blinds and a view of the grocery store parking lot. But it's mine. I painted the walls the color I wanted. I hung up pictures of places I want to go. I work my job. I come home. I water my plant like it's a pet, and sometimes I cry when I wash the dishes and remember what it felt like to be erased by people who swore they loved me. But I also laugh. I laugh at stupid sitcoms, and I talk to strangers in coffee shops, and I let myself hope that maybe, one day, I'll build something that looks like a family, even if I have to construct it from scratch. People say blood is thicker than water. But that's not the whole quote, is it? The full saying is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Meaning the family you choose can be stronger than the one you're born into. I didn't make a scene that Christmas. I made a statement. And next year, I'll send cards again. But this time, we'll see who gets one.